holds great oil pressure and I don't hear any bad noises. So it's a great engine. What's up everybody? Welcome back to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. I have here a 2003 Chevy Trailblazer Extended. And the thing about these is some of them came with an optional LM4 V8. If you're not familiar, the LM4 is an aluminum block 5.3 liter V8. I bought this one for $700. A lot of times if you keep on the lookout, you can find them pretty affordably. This one runs pretty well, aside from having really old gas in it, and it drives also. So at $700 you can't lose. More than likely I'll end up with a free aluminum block LS engine to swap into other projects and use for whatever I want, or maybe sell it. But these can be tricky to remove, so I want to show you, at least in my opinion, the least difficult way to get these engines out. So we're going to start with the basics of any engine removal. Get the antifreeze drained, get the battery disconnected, get the air cleaner assembly out of your way, and start removing the cooling hoses, the upper radiator hose, lower radiator hose, as well as the hood. Get all that stuff out of your way. It's going to make everything else easier to do. There's no drain in the radiator on this one, so I'm just going to put a cut in the lower radiator hose. Your intake air ducting is just one electrical connector and a couple flathead screws. The hood has one 10mm ground and two 13mm bolts on each side. Hood props, it makes it easier to get them off yourself. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is get this center support section out. More 10 and 13mm bolts. The real key here is just get as much stuff out of your way as you can. You're here for the engine, so get all that other garbage out of your way. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know I typically don't like to use the Sawzall, but the core support is part of the unibody on this one. So core support's got to go. Look at all the room for activities now. All right, I'm gonna keep going, work on getting the AC condenser and radiator out of this sucker. Okay, so a little status update. Got everything in the front out of the way here. Radiator out, AC condenser out, cut that core support off. I've got the PCM off the bracket. So next thing to do is get the electrical undone. I haven't pulled one of these apart before, so I'm gonna pop it open. It looks like I have a large harness that runs into the main connector here, just like in all the other LS engines I've pulled. So more than likely I'm gonna be able to just unplug that main wire connector, get my main power feeds here disconnected, and just keep all of that right with the engine. All right, so we've got our ground disconnected. piece of the power distribution center here, pushes down onto the lower half. We've got this large connector here, connected to the main engine harness, which also comes down and connects to the pack module. This is drive-by-wire engine. So it's important to get the pack module as well as the throttle pedal. For now, I'm just going to unplug the wire so I can have a little more room to work and get the wires pushed out of my way. Maybe. Man, it's tight. Okay, I need to grab a 7mm. And they've got these little covers on everything in here. Like, I don't want you to be able to figure out that there's wires underneath. You screw in from the top. Aha. Okay, so I need to go grab a 7mm. I really only need the connector to the main engine harness. I'm not worried about any of the other ones. Right, there's our main engine harness. 3. Just need to get the pack module. Buried down in here. There we go. There's our pack module. Ta-da! There we go. It's that portion. We've got our main ground here that we need to get loosened off. There's our main power feed and our main ground. That's body harness. That's body harness. Alright, so we've got our electrical for the engine disconnected from the vehicle. Okay, I started getting the heater lines and the air conditioner lines off on this side. It's getting a little too cold out here for my blood, so I'm going to leave it there today, and then I'll pick it back up tomorrow or the next day whenever I have some more time. So, alright, it's a few days later, picking up where I left off. The big thing I need to do is get the axle shafts pulled out. The front differential is bolted to the oil pan on these. That you can leave in place, but you need to remove the axle shafts that go out to the wheels. So I'm going to get right after it, and hopefully we can get this thing out before we run out of daylight. All right, so here's where we're at. I've got the exhaust off. I've got the rear drive shaft out. I've got the electrical connections underneath disconnected. All that stuff unhooks just like on your normal pickup truck, full-size SUV, any of those things. For the most part underneath, it's all the same. The cross member is a little bit different, but it'll unbolt just like any other transmission cross member will. Now, the thing that's going to start to be challenging is, obviously, this engine is, I mean, it is crammed in here. It just barely fits between the frame rails. The motor mounts are very different from your normal, you know, V8 motor mount in a pickup or an SUV. These 3 bolts behind the strut go through the frame and into the motor mount. So in order to get those out, it looks like I'm gonna have to unbolt the upper strut mounts and then lower the whole lower control arm down so I can gain access to those bolts. I'm still fighting to get the axle shaft stub out of the driver's side. I think the snap ring got wedged, so I'm gonna have to get creative to try to get that out of there. So once I get that undone, get these motor mounts undone, then I should be able to disconnect the fuel lines, and then the engine should be able to be removed from the frame and chassis, I hope. So I removed the struts on both sides. Like I said, these are the motor mount bolts. I took 2 out on each side. I left 1 in just to hold it in place until I can get the engine hoist hooked up to it. Now, I think I've got all of the electrical connections undone. I've got the fuel lines disconnected. The only thing that's still connecting the engine to the vehicle itself is the power steering lines. And I believe, I mean, there's probably 1 or 2 electrical connections around here somewhere that I've missed that I'll need to get undone also. And I think there may be 1 or 2 of the rear heat and AC climate control lines still connected also. Those run around the back of the engine, and I can't access them, and I don't need to save them. So I'm just gonna start getting the engine moved out, and then hopefully I'll be able to get those lines undone. Well, there we go. We got it out of there. And as far as I can tell, we got it out without damaging anything. Wire harness is still intact. We didn't damage anything on the intake manifold or anywhere up on the top. Transmission and transfer case came out just fine. It is a tight fit. The exhaust manifolds, I mean, they just barely clear between the strut towers. And outside of that, in some ways this is a little bit better than on one of the big trucks because you can remove all of the cross members underneath the transmission and the engine, which gives you a lot of space to tip the back, the transfer case down and angle the engine up. And that makes it a lot easier to get it out of there. If it were me and I were trying to get an aluminum block 5.3, this would be the way I'd go about it. I mean, you can pick up a Trailblazer that runs and drives for $600, $700, $800, pull the engine out. By the time I sell the stuff that I don't want, the engine will have been paid for itself, not to mention anything else that I make on top of it. Before I forget to do it, I want to show you the main differences between the Trailblazer 5.3 and a 5.3 you would get out of a full-size truck or SUV. So first and foremost is the oil pan. You can see it's a front sump with a hole that goes through it. That hole is where the axle shaft for the front differential goes through to turn the passenger side wheel. It has, specific to the Trailblazer and the Trailblazer SS, exhaust manifolds. They run really tight to the block, so they're great if you're trying to put this into a compact package, something with a small engine bay. These manifolds run really tight to the block. You can see how close they are here. So it's a good space saving. Power steering pump is different than your typical power steering pump. The accessory bracket here is different also than what you would find on a full-size truck or SUV. The AC compressor is different from what you would find on a full-size truck or SUV. And the motor mounts are Trailblazer specific also, but more than likely if you're swapping this into something, you're not going to use those manifolds anyway. Everything else about the engine is the same as one in a full-size truck or SUV. The bell housing bolt pattern is the same. The starter is the same. The flex plate is the same. Intake manifold, injectors. The wire harness is a little bit different, but as far as I can tell, it's just in the routing and the grounds. Overall, I mean, if you want to get yourself an aluminum LS style engine, I think these extended Trailblazers, they're kind of the diamond in the rough, so to speak. And you can get yourself a nice lightweight engine with a ton of power potential in good operating condition. And really, aside from getting the axle shafts out of the differential through the oil pan, and the fact that you're going to have to well, not have to, but you're more than likely going to need to change the oil pan. I mean, really, guys, it's not that much different from pulling an engine out of a full-size SUV or a pickup truck. It's a little tighter, but I was able to follow the same process, same procedure on here, and just add that additional step of pulling those axle shafts out of the front diff. So I hope you find this helpful. Thanks so much for watching. For all of you that have subscribed, thank you so much. It means a ton to me. I appreciate all of you supporting the channel. And until the next video, take care. These things are kind of a little diamond in the rough, a little hidden gem that not everybody is looking for. So the market hasn't driven the prices through the roof yet.